Okay.
I am calling to order this Planning Board Capital Improvement Program Committee on Thursday, August 13th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. in City Hall and also remote via Microsoft Teams.
Perfect. Okay, I'll read read through the process here. Good evening. Due to the coronavirus pandemic and pursuant to Governor's Emergency Order Number 12, issued March 23rd, 2020, in accordance with Executive Order 2020-04, the Planning Board's Capital Improvement Program Subcommittee is authorized to meet electronically without a quorum physically present in the same location. Please note there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with Emergency Order Number 12, we've taken action to provide public access to the meeting by telephone with a potential additional access by video, provide public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, and to provide a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. This meeting, Microsoft Teams is being used as the communication platform in addition to the people present here in this room. All members of the subcommittee have the ability to communicate contemporaneously, and the public body has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in the meeting by visiting lebanonnh.gov/live and clicking on the pertinent listed meeting. Instructions on how to attend are provided on the web page. To assist in the preparation of meeting minutes and to ensure all participants are aware of who is participating, all speakers are asked to identify themselves and to spell their first and last names before beginning to speak. In order to ensure the best possible transmission of the meeting content, it is suggested that you disable the camera on your chosen device to reduce the video feed and increase the available bandwidth for all attendees. To improve sound quality and to reduce the amount of feedback in the system, please ensure your microphones are muted unless you are asking a question or making a comment. If anyone has a problem with access during the course of the meeting, please email planning@lebanonnh.gov. We will do our best to respond to those emails and address the issue. In the event there are technical difficulties and we are unable to hold the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. All votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. The meeting will begin by taking a roll call attendance. Each member states their name, and please also state if there's anyone else in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under RSA 91A. So I will start with the roll call vote. Mr. Garland?
Present.
Ms. Davis?
Present and alone.
And Mr. Martz?
This is Tom Martz, and I am present and alone.
Perfect. All present and accounted for. What I'd like to do to start, and just to sort of lay the groundwork, because I've got a little script that I read for these meetings, just to orient the committee members as well as the public who may be watching or listening. It explains the process, it explains the CIP program itself, and a little bit of the process, and it outlines the steps we will take tonight. The Capital Improvement Program, CIP, is a document that is developed and updated annually for use by the City Council to review proposed budget expenditures relative to the capital needs of the community. The CIP is an essential component of the city's financial planning effort and provides the long-range perspective and framework for addressing its capital improvement needs. As a companion to the annual budget, the CIP provides the mechanism for anticipating future facility and infrastructure requirements and ensuring that they are funded in a responsible and systematic fashion. The CIP is prepared in accordance with RSA 674:5 through 8 and is developed based on and in support of the goals of the established in the city's master plan to ensure orderly growth and development in the community. The CIP bridges the gap between planning and spending, between the visions of the master plan and the fiscal realities of improving and expanding community facilities. Although the CIP covers a period of at least 6 years, the City Council only considers year one, which is 2021 in this case, as part of the annual budget review process. The remaining years 2 through 6 of the CIP, 2022 through 2026, and beyond, are used to begin anticipating upcoming capital expenditures over the foreseeable planning horizon. One reason the CIP covers a minimum of 6 years is to allow the city to plan for upcoming large capital expenditures in order to avoid significant fluctuations in spending and tax rates to the extent possible. For the first time, this year's draft CIP includes projects anticipated beyond the immediate 6-year time period in order to further improve and enhance the use of this document as a community planning tool. Lebanon defines CIP items to include capital expenditures that pertain to planning and land use within the city, including acquisition of land, construction of new buildings and facilities over $50,000, including design and other pre-construction costs, major planning-related studies over $25,000, and those projects that could have an impact on the city's capacity for growth. Other capital expenditures, including operational items such as new or replacement vehicles or equipment, and maintenance improvements that do not increase capacity for growth, such as repaving a road, fixing a sidewalk, or other in-kind repairs, are excluded from the definition of a CIP item. The Planning Board and its subcommittee only reviews CIP items as defined above and does not review or comment to the City Council on other capital expenditures. The annual CIP preparation process begins in January with a review of the prior year's adopted CIP and capital appropriations. In April, city departments were given instructions to prepare capital project proposals, including supporting documentation. Following submission of those proposals, the finance and planning departments and the city manager reviewed each project with the individual departments to assess and analyze fiscal capacity and financial programming on the project list. During this process, the timelines of the projects were considered, the timeliness of the projects was considered based on the relative urgency or need, the availability of funding, existing and proposed debt loads, etc. Following this administrative review, the remaining projects were classified as CIP items or other capital expenditures according to the city's definitions. The Planning Board CIP Subcommittee is responsible for the initial review of the CIP project list and for recommending appropriate capital expenditures regarding CIP items to the full Planning Board. The full Planning Board then reviews the subcommittee's comments and recommendations and prepares its own recommendations to the City Council via the City Manager for consideration in the upcoming year's budget. This year, the subcommittee will again be scoring the projects based on criteria developed by the Planning Board and Planning Department. Staff recommends that the subcommittee take a few moments at the end of each project discussion to create a composite score for the project. These composite scores will be compiled by staff and made available to the full Planning Board, the administration, and the City Council as a means to further evaluate and prioritize the proposed projects as the review process continues forward. Since the administration has already extensively reviewed each project prior to its presentation, it is not anticipated that the subcommittee will develop a wholly different CIP project list from that developed by the administration. However, the scoring may be used to identify outliers that will assist the subcommittee in making recommendations and may help the administration to improve the CIP as it moves forward through the final review and budget process. As a final disclaimer, please note that the costs of individual projects are based on the best estimates available at the time this plan is prepared. Actual project costs are a function of detailed studies by architects, engineers, and contractors and may change over time. So that lays the groundwork for what the board will be doing. The question came up earlier. I think Mr. Martz asked the question earlier, and it was something that I intended to cover anyway, which is that for the first time this year, the Planning Board Subcommittee and the full Planning Board itself will, when you look at the CIP, you're looking at the full 6 years, and we're laying out the anticipated expenditures that will be funded by general fund supported debt over the 6-year period. The city anticipates retiring approximately $20.7 million of general fund supported debt over the next 6 years. And the city manager has outlined to the city council a goal of trying to not spend more than that over the upcoming 6 years in an effort to begin to level off funding. So what the CIP that's been prepared so far, based on the administration's review, the dollars in the first 6 years under the general fund category, at least, are programmed to identify not more than $20.7 million in general fund supported debt. That does not include projects that are anticipated to be self-sufficient, and it does not include projects that may be funded by debt from other funds, such as the water fund, sewer fund, or solid waste fund, or the airport fund. So that's a little bit different this year than prior years. Sean, did you want to add anything to that last little bit?
You actually articulated it quite well. We're in the post-CSO era, or almost in the post-CSO era. We don't have any more funding we have to appropriate for the CSO project. We have CSO 13 that will come up next year. We already have sufficient funds appropriated for that, and that is debt to be levied, which will occur probably sometime in next year. But the goal, as David quite aptly indicated, we have got to level off the amount of debt that the city has in its general fund. The enterprise funds are a different story and have to be looked at differently, but we've got to level off that amount of debt. Right now, the trajectory the city is on, it is coming close to its statutory debt limits. Now, that's based upon 3%. The ceiling is 3% of the city's assessed valuation, which is $190 million. Almost $2 billion. With the reevaluation, we're likely that's going to change that, and we won't be, the threat will not be the same in regards to meeting that level, because that assessed valuation is going to go up. But we still have to pay for what we have. So the goal is to only take on new debt by the amount we're going to be retiring. And all that will do is level off the debt load. It's not going to reduce it at all, but it is going to level it off. And the only way we're going to actually get ahead of that is by increased growth in the community, increasing the tax base to spread that further. So that really is the trajectory. Municipalities in the state of New Hampshire, unlike the federal government, are required to have balanced budgets. We can only incur debt for certain purposes, unlike the federal government, and we have to be able to pay it back, unlike the federal government. That's both state law that applies to the state's budget, the county budgets, as well as municipalities in the state. So we've got to do that which is responsible to get us there. The CSO obviously created a huge debt load for the city, and it's going to take a while to address that. And we have a backlog of projects that we have not been able to tackle because of that. And we're trying to parse out and be able to do as many of those as we can in different sectors, whether they be infrastructure in terms of buildings, roads and bridges, streets, in other areas that we have to address, vehicles and things of that nature. So we're trying to address all those sectors with the limited funding that we have, and that's the goal. We have to look at it now more than ever in terms of 6 years. Now, the projects that we have proposed for 2021, hopefully they get approved as they are, but the projects in the future may have to change depending on what the priorities are. But my goal is, and I'm going to stick to that, is keeping that debt load only to the amount that we're actually going to retire over that period of time. If you look in here carefully, there are a lot of things that are not in there. There's no money in there for West Lebanon improvements to occur. We do have some money for right now to at least get that project started, but there's no money in there because that has not been fleshed out yet. There's a number of projects that have been pushed into 2027, what I collectively call the parking lot, until funding can be found or something changes. So a lot of things got pushed into that. A lot of things that people in the city would like to see, I just cannot fund with $20.7 million. I had to make priority choices, and I have done so. There's going to be clearly some folks who disagree with those decisions. Ultimately, that's up to the council what it chooses to do. The council only, as David said, only approves funding for 1 year at a time. But they really need to take a strong look at what the total 6-year period is based upon the new methodology that I am suggesting.
Okay, so with all that said, we're here tonight to begin reviewing the capital improvement program items that are, and we're going to review everything that meets the definition of a capital improvement program item, regardless of where the funding falls in this, on this spreadsheet. So some of these projects may be funded for, or may be proposed for funding in 21. Others may not be proposed until 27 or beyond. They're out in that parking lot, as Sean just mentioned. But to take full advantage of this tool, the CIP as a community planning tool, we're going to begin to look at those projects regardless of where they're currently programmed, so that we can help score and prioritize those projects. And that's where the planning board subcommittee and ultimately the full planning board come in. Tonight, we're going to try to review the non-public works projects. Public works typically has the majority of capital projects, as you would imagine. We're going to give them an entire night on their own next week. But tonight, we're going to cover library, airport, police, fire, recreation, and planning and zoning. With that, I'd like to...
David, before we get into, sorry to interrupt, I asked Sean a perennial question, which is schools. I noticed that there is one number in the spreadsheet. I conclude that once again, the school administration has not provided any details. Do you happen to know whether they're planning to take that number to the voters again with a warrant, or what the status is there?
I have not heard anything from them. I don't think there's any particular plan at this point as to what they're going to do from this point forward in terms of their capital projects.
I did get more detail this year than previous years, but I collapsed it all into a single number for the planning board because, again, the board has no control over those projects. The school district is its own governmental body, so I can provide you with that information. If you would like, I can certainly do that. Be happy to.
Every year we get into this because the law says that schools should be part of this review process, but they never show up to the meeting to be questioned, so.
I have that, I have more information than I typically get, but I condensed it down. I didn't think you would want, and maybe that's my fault, didn't think you would want the details on the second floor window replacements at the SAU building, for example.
Right, but it's $20 odd million.
Yeah, and most of that is in a single item, which again, will have to go to the voters.
Okay, so most of it is going to go to the voters anyway.
Absolutely.
But the purpose of that, though, is to be able to plan so we can avoid tax rate hikes and things like that. And that's where your job is to help. If you're the only entity looking at that total big picture, the council isn't necessarily tasked with that, but you are by statute, as you know, so that you can plan that out and work that forward. You're the only people that are in that position to do that. And it does require cooperation from them.
Yeah, just briefly, the total number for fiscal year 21 for the school district is identified as $22.5 million. Approximately 21.3 million of that is the single district renovation project, which again, it would be a bond project. It would have to go to the voters. It's gone several times and has not yet passed. All of the others are projects that get covered through capital reserve funds or monies left over at the end of their fiscal year. They have a much lower threshold for what triggers or what constitutes a capital improvement project. I think their limit is $10,000, where ours is $50,000 and up. So they've got some considerably smaller projects that they call capital projects. But we can definitely talk about that.
Yeah, I think if we could just get that spreadsheet to the board members as an information point, and again, the extent that the big bullet is going to go to the voters, I'm much more comfortable not having them here. It's just a perennial problem.
You're right.
They should be part of this process and never are.
It's a difficult balancing act there. You're right. Tom or Laurel, do you have any questions before we turn it over to the library director, Sean Fleming, to start discussing the first project?
None for me, David. Thank you.
None for me either.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will turn it over. So we'll start. This is the first project. The agenda packet materials for tonight's meeting were put together approximately in the order that the projects will be reviewed. So this first project by the library starts on page 1 of the packet, which is actually page 8 after you get through some of the spreadsheet and the errata at the beginning. So with that, I will turn it over to the library director, Sean Fleming, to describe the Lebanon Library renovation project.
Thank you, David. So the audio is up there, so should I really try to project? Is it on the screen? Is that where they should go here?
They should be able to hear you.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, thank you for your time tonight. I wanted to start off by saying that. So the Lebanon Library renovation plans, they predate the completion of the Kilton Library, which was actually done back in 2010. We've had local residents on the Lebanon side of town who wanted to see the Lebanon Library improved for quite a long time, many years. Mainly the remarks have been focused on making it a more usable building for patrons, just in general. So, moving into Kilton, moved much of our work done by staff to that building across town. So we have unused or infrequently used office space that can be made into space for patrons. So we have room over there to make some changes. That was the impetus for us to begin looking at making changes to that building. That led to us broadening the scope of what we're doing as we discovered issues that residents wanted to address. When we first started out, we actually weren't sure if we even needed an architect for some of the things that we wanted to get done. Realized that we did, that we would have been not able to really make the changes that we wanted to without going that route. And in doing that, we found that there are issues that the architect identified, the public identified that went beyond what our first initial wishes were. So I'll focus on safety and health issues first. So the front exterior stair at Lebanon is unsafe. Our door actually swings out beyond the landing. A few years ago, a patron fell while trying to enter the building. He ended up in the ICU. That stairwell dates back to 1909. We should be able to make some changes and keep the historical integrity of that stair. Other stairwells are also challenging in the building. They also date back to the early 1900s. The 2 stairwells that lead to the basement are both very old and really deficient. So we have a buried oil tank that was installed in 1984. We identified that as an issue that we needed to change a couple of years ago. When we realized that the scope of the project might be expanded, we put that on hold. So that actually went before the planning board a couple of years ago, but before it got approved by the city council, we realized, let's wait and see what we're gonna do with our HVAC system. Outside air is not brought into the building at all during winter months. Lack of air circulation might not be thought of as important by some during normal times, but I might debate that, but during the pandemic, it's clearly a health issue. So our buildings are both closed right now. When we do reopen, it's likely Kilton's going to be the building that opens up first because it actually is always bringing in outside air, which not only does make you feel like you're more comfortable in the building, you're getting more oxygen, but it is a health issue that really has been identified during this pandemic. We have aging infrastructure that needs to be replaced. The air handling units that cool the building are both over 20 years old. They're past their expected life. Carpeting on the second floor dates back to the 1984 addition. With the wear and tear of numerous patrons using the building, that needs to be replaced. Our renovation would also put in place a central stair in the building. So I'm not sure how many planning board members are familiar with the building, but there's no central stair. We have, as I mentioned already, 2 stairwells that lead to the basement. The stairwell at least the second floor is almost out the back door. I've talked to people who used the building for decades who didn't even know we had a second floor because they didn't use the entrance that brings you up to that second floor. Central stair would allow us to renovate a restroom that we have on the first floor, making that more accessible for patrons. Right now it actually is a staff restroom, but it's more, probably at one point was a broom closet. Can't be made into a patron accessible restroom, but would be with this renovation. We'd also be able to put a restroom in the basement. We have our programs down there, children's programs are there, so oftentimes parents in need of a restroom can't use one in the basement. You have to go up a stair to the first floor, down the stair, into the children's room, and then get there, or they take the elevator. And it's not only been an issue for children. I attended a program about a year ago where we had an individual who had some special needs who needed to get to the restroom. The program was local interest, somebody from the Upper Valley, somebody with special needs showed up and could not easily get to the restroom. She was not very mobile, and having an accessible restroom is a big deal for a lot of people. We'll also be adding 2 meeting room spaces, which is something that people have asked for in the Lebanon Library for many years. We have 3 meeting room spaces at Kilton Library that have been very popular since we opened up. And as far as funding goes, our library foundation has a goal of raising $300,000 for this project by the end of the year. It's a goal. I'm hesitant to make it a commitment because it's a compressed time frame. With the pandemic, there are a lot of unknowns as far as how successful we'll be with this campaign. We already do have a commitment for a challenge grant of $50,000, so we need to find $50,000 to bring that in. We've contracted out for 2 fundraisers that our board of trustees is paying for. So we're working on that right now. So I wanted to keep this fairly succinct, but give you an overview of the project. If you have any questions, I would be very happy to entertain them. Anything that you may have based on what I just talked about. You may have also received about 6 months ago a survey that we sent out to the community asking how people ranked the things that we were looking at doing. So if you had any questions based on that survey or anything you might have read in news about this project, please answer your questions.
Well, I asked a question, I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, and I think it was the whole board, and I got ripped by one of the members. This had to do with stacks, but basically, I have 2 things. One is how much money we put into an old building, it'll always stay an old building, at least in the structural design. And 2, where are libraries going in this digital age?
So the first question is
I don't know what it costs to build Kilton, but to me that is a new, it already has stacks, but it has huge amounts of open space. Right. I don't want to say vision, because I'm not a library specialist by any means, but my idea is the world is going more and more digital, and we're going to have more and more demand for space, as Kilton has big open space for stations that people can come in and use rather than people coming into the library to look at stacks of books, right? That's a very narrow part of this discussion, but more broadly where our library is going and what this community wants. So that's one question. And related to it, we didn't have that old building, and you were talking about putting up a new building. Are we talking about 5 times, 10 times the amount that we're talking about putting into an old building? You see where I'm going through the discussion.
So the Kilton Library project was a $6.2 million project, and that was 10 years ago. So it would be more, probably like 7.5 million for a building that is twice the size of the Lebanon Library. So for about $2 million, we are renovating an old building. I think that would be less than building new. And it is a beloved community building. It's very well used. So the Lebanon Library, we see a different profile of the people that use that building. I say on average, people that use the Lebanon Library are actually using more often to read than on the other side of town. And the reasons why are somewhat unknown to me. I don't see as many people using the Kilton Library for the children's room, for example, as the Lebanon Library. That space gets used quite often by parents with small children. So it's a very robust very active children's room on this side of town. Kilton Library is
On the other hand, I've used the basement facilities for tutoring purposes
Right.
frequently, and there's no one there.
yeah,
And that's a lot of space.
it is, yes. Yeah. Yes, and well, that's our intent, is we're actually going to, that meeting room space will still be there downstairs. It's going to be swapped out. There are large groups that use that. AA uses that twice a week in the evenings. And,
Sure.
And there are other groups that use that space. But as I mentioned, you might have not caught it, but we are adding 2 smaller meeting room spaces for people that do want to use that. And to your point about stacks, we're actually going to be reducing the footprint of the stacks slightly and making more space for patrons of the building. Because when I was beginning this discussion and saying people wanted us to make changes even before we were done with Kilton, we rarely have people show up to our trustees meetings, but we did have some people who would come to our trustees meeting and say, you need to make more space for patrons here now, which we just couldn't do at the time with our attention at Kilton. We're not doing that 10 years later. Really. That's the intent, is to make more space, especially on the second floor for quiet reading purposes, because that front area, as you probably well know, you walk into the building and it's a bustling, kind of noisy area, and people want a quiet area to study. As far as where services are going with libraries, so books have proved to be very resilient. So our circulation numbers really haven't budged very much in the last 5 years. People are still reading print books. So as much as people are on their devices right now in this room, people are, and people love their devices. I'm on my cell phone often. Books have proven to be very, very, people are.
A difficult question to answer. How many of those books are from people who come in and browse the stacks versus people who order them and then pick them up? You see, because I don't even know how you manage the hundreds of thousands of books that are now available. Nobody has the space for all of them.
Right.
And you have stacks to entice people, and then they go on to do searches. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's sort of a marketing question.
So most of the things that circulate in a library are new items. About 3/4 of what goes out is new. People want the latest James Patterson. They want the latest cookbook that's out. That's really the majority of what we buy. But to supplement that, if somebody wants a book that's 5 years old, what we often will do is actually do an interlibrary loan, and it comes from around the place in the state. We get about 3,000 of those every year. That you don't need. Public libraries are not archives, as you said. We can't hold on to everything. We sometimes will discard books, and people will bring them back to us, even though we have a big withdrawn stamp on them. And they say, don't you want this back? And no, we don't, because we don't have the room for it. And to also provide the quiet reading spaces that we were talking about, or the meeting room spaces. Yeah, so public libraries are not archives. Things are coming out. We're pulling books from the shelves and discarding them constantly and adding new items to the shelves all the time as well.
Thank you.
Laurel or Tom, any questions?
Hi, thank you. This is Laurel. And I also want to say that the comparison between Kilton and the downtown Lebanon Library doesn't hold up very well, because there, as I recall, there was a sizable bequest that got the funding for the Kilton project off the ground. So Sean, maybe you have the exact number. I mean, I was on the fundraising committee for that effort a million years ago, but I want to say it was somewhere around $2 million.
It was a little bit south of that, Laurel. Yeah, and thank you for your involvement in that. It took a lot of people to get that done. But yeah, you were key to that from what I remember. So the funding model for this project is going to be different than it was for Kilton as a new project. So even we had a goal of 75% funding of the Kilton Library, and we reached only 70%, which is, you know, I have a hard time saying only 70% when that was over $4 million. So the Kiltons gave a request of about $1.3 million, and then we received a lot of funds after that, thanks to your efforts and others. There was one gift towards the end of the campaign of over $600,000 from a woman who was fairly new to town, who passed away from cancer, who had books on the shelves. I hope for helping us to close out that campaign. With the Lebanon Library project, I think it is a compelling project, but as our fundraising contractors have pointed out, it's an older building. It's not necessarily as compelling a project for donors as the Kilton was. It was a flashy new building. You know, we're really doing some things like with the buried oil tank and other items like that that are hard to put a name and a plaque to. So, but you know, we're still going out there and trying to fundraise for this project.
Tom, any comments, questions?
Yeah, thanks, David. This is Tom, and it's interesting. I've been involved in this kind of discussion about libraries with colleges and universities for the last 40 years. And I'm kind of reminded of, to get to Bruce's comment about going to things that are online, talking with somebody about 20 years ago when the technology was starting to go towards online computer books. And I mentioned that, you know, I thought that was going to be the wave of the future. And this fellow who was really involved in the actual technology development of it said, no, you'll always find that books will have a tactile sense to human beings that the internet will not have. And that will continue to be that way. The question I have about the two libraries, I'm very familiar with the one on Main Street in West Leb, and less the one in downtown. Do the collections that are held in both of those duplicate each other, or do you have specific collections in one and another collection in the other? And obviously they're sharing back and forth, but is there a difference in the collections that are there, or are they duplication?
So that's a very good question. So it is something that when we opened up Kilton, we thought about, you know, trying to make one library or the other specialized in some regard. So we do hold certain authors, for example, at one library or the other. So if you have a series of 10 books by one author, that will be usually one building or the other. But I think probably what distinguishes the two buildings the most is Lebanon Library just has so much more teen activity. There's a much larger teen collection at the Lebanon Library because sometimes after school we'll have 20, 30, actually before the pandemic hit, we were seeing a lot of activity. You can see maybe 40 kids cycle in and out of that building. So it's a very active area. We just don't buy as many teen books for Kilton because we just don't get the kids on that side of town. And the historical collection is held at Lebanon Library as well. And I'm glad you brought up this question because that's right now in an area that's now browsable. It's in a staff-only area. And our intent is to bring that up to the second floor on the balcony and make that an area where people can browse it, because for as many digital collections as there are and digital resources that there are out there, some things are not yet digitized, and we hold some of those things in Lebanon Library. And if we have them there so people can see them and access them and actually just bring them to a table very close by and work on those. At this time of year, it's a time when you actually see a lot of people doing tours of certain regions, and they'll be doing genealogy or historical research, and they'll stop by Lebanon Library. It's one of the reasons why it's hard to be closed right now, is probably a lot of people have plans to do that. And so that will be more accessible at Lebanon Library as well with this renovation. So excellent question.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we will move on to the next project, which is the airport runway safety area improvements. Thank you, Sean.
You did.
Carl Gross, the airport manager.
Good evening. Our project is the runway CP area improvement project. Currently, we are in the process of doing a limited scope airport layout plan update to look at the project. What we've come up with in this project is a reduction in the category of runway from what is presently called a C2 runway to a B2 runway. What that means is that the approach speed of the aircraft that we're looking at is a little bit slower than the previous master plan, requiring a smaller safety area. Previous estimates for this total project were between $30 and $35 million. Last week, we held a teleconference with the New Hampshire Department of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Administration and Stantec, who are our present consultants. And our costs look like they're going to be running between $7 and $8 million for the total project. The first phase that we are going to be doing in 2021 is an environmental assessment for the runway project. We do have some wetlands and we'll be disturbing some vegetation for the project. We will also be doing what is called a reimbursable agreement. The Federal Aviation Administration will have to study the relocation of one of the navigation aids for this project. The Federal Aviation Administration is the one entity that does these studies. And what the reimbursable agreement does is it takes the annual entitlement funds from the airport and provides them to a group in the Federal Aviation Administration called Technical Operations. They will do their own study as to the feasibility of relocating this navigation aid. Preliminary indications right now indicate that relocating the navigation aid is actually going to be more beneficial to the airport and the users of the airport. The total cost of these two projects is roughly $280,000, and that will be funded 90% by the Federal Aviation Administration, 5% by the state of New Hampshire, and 5% by the airport. The airport's funds traditionally come out of the passenger facility charge fees that are charged at the airport for arriving passengers and departing passengers. The project itself will go for an additional 4 years after these two studies. The second year will be a design phase. The third year will be work on runway 725 with the reduction of the the runway category. All but one of the runway safety areas that we have right now will space we have for the runway safety areas will meet the new criteria. Runway 7 is the one that does not meet the criteria. For us, luckily, that is just a matter of repainting that runway and changing a couple of runway lights, and runway 725 will go from 5,500 feet down to 5,300 feet, and we will have compatible safety areas for that runway. The fourth year of the project is to do the extension of runway 1836 and to correct a hotspot with a couple of taxiways that proceed directly from a ramp to a runway. Current FAA design criteria does not allow for that. And the final phase will be to extend a parallel taxiway all the way down to the new end of the runway.
Okay, that's it. Questions, Bruce, Laurel, Tom? Tom and Laurel, you guys are muted.
My understanding, this is all pretty well mandated.
The safety area project is mandated, yes. What we're looking at, though, by changing the category of the runway is a significant reduction in the cost of the project and a significant decrease in the environmental impact that the initial project would have required.
Laurel or Tom?
I do have a question. Do you anticipate that these changes will result in any increased air traffic to and from the airport?
I do not see them resulting in any increased air traffic. One of the components that we looked at when we were studying the preliminary layout of this project was to keep the runway and taxiway separation as we build a new parallel taxiway the same that would be required for the airport now under the C2 category. The reason we did that was future planning in case our traffic did increase, or not necessarily increase, but if larger jets started coming into the airport, it gives us that ability to extend the safety area again for runway 1836 without having to relocate a taxiway. The project is not necessarily going to bring more aircraft. What it's going to do is meet the FAA safety criteria.
Thank you very much.
Tom?
Yeah, the one question I have, a little clarity. Did I hear that you said that the runways are going to be shortened, or is?
Runway 725 will be shortened. Runway 1836 will be lengthened by 200 feet.
Okay, and the reason for the one being shortened is because of the shifting of the positions, or I couldn't quite read clearly in the document what was happening there.
Runway 725 is our east-west runway. Off the east end, we have a significant drop in terrain to the highway. And off the west end, we have about a 30-foot drop down to Air Park Road. So we do not have this physical land to actually do the safety area for that runway. So what we're going to do is displace the runway 7 end, which is the west end, approximately 200 feet. So we'll have 200 feet less for landing on runway 7. We plan on marking it so that that 200 feet is usable for a takeoff run, however. And that runway is just constrained by the highway and our Park Road. We just, in order to bridge over Air Park Road, the cost would be phenomenal.
So not being a pilot, I'm probably going to be asking questions that aren't going to make too much sense, but what types of planes then would be able to use the shorter runway? Would they only be for takeoff, or would any landings take place on an east-west runway?
The bigger impact on that 200 feet of less runway on runway 7 is going to be landing. Corresponding though, we are adding 200 feet to runway 1836. And we've looked at the winds in the region for both runways. And the Federal Aviation Administration requires 95% wind coverage for the runways. Runway 1836 has about a 99% wind coverage. And it is also the runway that has our instrument approach on it. So that'll be the one that is getting extended. What we're doing is basically shifting the primary runway from 725 and making 1836 the new primary runway.
Great, thank you. That clarifies it. Thank you.
If there are no other questions at the moment, I neglected to invite the board to do the scoring of the first project. So I think what we'll do is score the airport project, since that's the one you just heard. And then we'll go back. I asked Sean Fleming, who was kind enough to stay for another moment or two, and we can go through his scoring as well. The scoring criteria are, hopefully you can see that on the screen. Yes?
So David, to start off with, we have our perennial, what is our definition of department division? Are these individual departments and they all get a top rate because they're...
Well, the departments like Public Works will be divided into the divisions for solid waste versus water versus sewer, because they'll have so many. All of the other departments, police, fire, library, airport, probably only have one. And so it should be less of an issue, but we'll view those on a department basis. So for example, since this is the airport's only CIP project, presumably that would be its top priority.
Right.
So for scoring, we're saying that a high score of 3 or a low score of 1, and this represents the importance of the project reported by the individual department or division head. So, Carl, is this top rated CIP project for you?
This is the top rated project for the airport.
Okay. So the one and only, so that would score 3. Criteria B addresses an emergency or urgent public safety need. Again, we modified this slightly from last year where it was, I think it was a 1 to 3 scoring. For this year, what we said is if it's an urgent public safety need or an emergency, the scoring here should really reflect that. If it's not an emergency, we expanded the scoring categories there. So 15 is high and 0 if it's not applicable. So in terms of addressing an emergency or public safety need, Carl, can you comment on that in terms of safety needs, legal requirements?
Currently, under the current airport designation that we have, the airport requires 1,000-foot safety areas on all runways in case of an aircraft that overshoots or undershoots a runway. We have one runway 36, which has a 1,000-foot safety area. The other 3 runways are deficient in that. By changing the runway category to B2 and going through the design process and the construction process, we will have all 4 safety areas meeting the FAA safety criteria for aircraft that either land short or roll along on a landing. And for us, it's a public safety need, and it's a need for the pilots and the aircraft.
Okay, so Bruce or
Well, to me, this is not what my understanding of B. It's not like a bridge that has collapsed and has to be repaired. It was the idea of putting this big number 15 so it stand out against everything else. This falls into category C, which is a known deficiency.
Okay, so would you give it a 0 or would you give it something in the lower?
I thought it was a binary. It was either 15 or 0.
Okay. Tom or Laurel? Comments on that?
Yeah, thank you, David. It's public health and safety needs or legal requirements. And as I understand it from the presentation, we are currently not meeting the FAA requirements. So would that fall under the category of, I mean, how do you weigh safety needs versus legal requirements?
That's a good question.
Well, the answer is yes. It is a legal requirement. We have to do this. The FAA requires us to do that. If we don't do it, they will cut off funds for operations of the airport. And it'll be totally our responsibility, which would obviously be pretty dramatic. So we do have a legal obligation. When the city accepted the airport, it had to follow those particular rules. So yes, it is a legal obligation.
Well, then wouldn't it be one of the highest priorities?
I would think so, but that's something that you folks have to decide. That's why we put it where we did.
In my opinion, it would be a very high priority because we certainly don't want to end up with the problem that you're outlining with the airport.
Yeah, this is Tom, and I kind of agree with Laurel. I'm not sure that I would put it in 15 because I understand what Bruce is saying, but I certainly would put it in at least the rate of 10 and maybe even a little bit higher than that because quite honestly, having been in airplanes that have overshot runways, now fortunately they were successful overshots and able to go back up. I certainly wouldn't hate to be on an airplane that comes down and misses the runway. You know, to me, having safety for passengers that are coming in, for the people who are on the ground, living in homes that are around that area, it seems like it would be something that would qualify maybe as not an emergency, but certainly as something that would be an urgent need. So I'm in favor of something around a 10 rating on that.
Okay, I mean, we're looking for a consensus sort of number here.
I would rate it slightly higher.
Okay.
For the simple reason that if the FAA shuts down the airport, then the city is on the hook for a very large price tag. Is that not correct, Sean?
That's exactly correct. We have to follow those rules, otherwise we will suffer penalties for that, the operational expenses that they pay right now. And the money that the federal government's already invested in that airport, they could tell us that you've got to pay us back for that, because you agreed to these rules when you agreed to accept the airport, and it's clearly in writing.
I don't see that we have I don't see an argument not to do it then.
So maybe a 12?
I'd 12 or a 13.
I would go with either one of those also. And I understand what's being said here is that, you know, it seems like not only do we have something that's an urgent need for safety, but we also have an urgent need so that we don't lose money from the federal government to help us run the airport. So either way, I think it's fairly urgent for us.
I've got it down as a 13. Criteria C addresses an emergency. These two, addresses a known or anticipated deficiency in service or facility. It seems like it substantially improves a known deficiency.
I'll go with that.
So will I.
I agree.
That's a 3. Provides capacity needed for future growth.
Airport manager has already answered that question. This is not designed for future growth.
So maybe a 0 or a 1.
I would be comfortable with a 0.
Okay. Results in long-term cost savings.
3.
3. Decreased operating costs. Is it anticipated to impact operations per se?
If we do this project, then FAA will continue to fund our improvement projects at the airport.
If we're using the same reason for 2 criteria, you're double dipping.
That might be that might be H, which we'll get to, which is, you know, it's an indication of whether the project can make use of or generate revenues other than city tax revenue. So to the extent that we remain in the good graces of FAA, maybe that's where that particular criteria should be scored.
I think what you're looking at, is it going to reduce the operating budget in any way? It's not. We're not going to lay any staff off. We're not going to have less maintenance expenses.
Right. It's not going to be cheaper to run the airport through this effort. So I think the answer to long-term cost savings is probably a 0 or a 1.
I'd go along with that too.
Maybe a 0.
Yeah.
Supports job development, increased tax base. Again, this factors an indication of the extent to which a project will encourage capital investment, increase tax base, improve job opportunities, attract customers, or produce public-private revenue. Doesn't sound like that's directly.
No, the only thing that I would point out, David, is that if we didn't have an airport, that would be a tremendous disadvantage for Lebanon and as far as growth. I'm sure that there are enough private corporate jets that probably come in and out of that airport that you know, somebody would look at a different location to put business in if we didn't have an airport. When I was down in Charlotte, the major things that made a city were an airport, hospital, and universities. So we've got a university, we've got a major hospital, and having an airport, I think, is the third category that is really necessary. So I think it does add to support of job development and tax base by being one of those categories that attracts industries to come to Lebanon.
So maybe a 1 or a 2? Doesn't sound like a 0.
Yeah, I would at least give it a 1, and I could be talked into a 2 also, but I would definitely give it a 1.
I would advocate for a 2 in this category.
Furthers the master plan or other organizational plans? Sounds like that's a yes.
I think so. I don't want to double dip, but I do think that it does further the master plan if we're trying to grow this community. I think that definitely adds to that.
Leverages non-property tax revenues. Again, we talked a little bit about that in terms of the FAA.
Well,
I think that's it.
so again, I guess I would ask the question, if we did not do this and the FAA did what it is threatening to do, would that result in unnecessary rise in property taxes?
According to the grant assurances that are signed with every new federal grant received, the airport is obligated, the airport sponsor, in this case, the city, is obligated to maintain the airport in an operating condition for 20 years.
So I would say it to be a yes.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe that's a 3.
I would say so.
And the last one is the matching funds available for a limited time. Carl, can you comment on the how the FAA annual payments or allowances are made?
The payments are made through the Aviation Trust Fund, which is funded through a combination of airline ticket sales, air freight, waybill costs, and fuel sales taxes. For this project, the FAA traditionally funds 90% of the project. The state of New Hampshire, which uses aircraft registrations and fuels tax as a matching fund, will fund 5% of the project. The airport will use passenger facility charges to fund the last portion of it. Currently, for FY21 in the federal budget, both the House and the Senate have proposals in the budget to 100% fund the FY21 projects that the airport is putting forward. So for a limited time, an additional 10% of the project cost is available through the federal government, again at 100% funding, which would mean no state or local match.
Could I ask a question, a follow-up question?
Sure.
Given the state of the airline industry in the pandemic, anticipate that the funds available through the federal government may dry up, not be available, be less than anticipated?
I do not. One of the bills that has bipartisan sponsorship in both houses, it requires the federal government to use 2018 and 2019 passenger numbers for funding of airports, rather than the current 2020 numbers that we're seeing nationwide. So both houses of Congress realize the importance to keep the funding up at the current level rather than to decrease the funding for the airports.
Thank you.
So it sounds like that's at least a 2, maybe a 3. In terms of that availability of, that limited availability of matching funds.
Yeah, I think this one sounds like something that has a consistent possibility of matching funds where, you know, I think of other things where the federal government will match for a while and then they won't. But it sounds like air traffic is something that will have future funds. So I'm good with 3.
3, okay.
To give a little context on passengers, nationwide in July, the airlines at various airports were seeing 25% of the previous year's passengers. Lebanon saw 30% last month, beating the national trend. And our control tower was slightly above the national trend as far as operations.
Okay. So we've scored the airport runway safety projects, and I'll recap the scores for next week. So I want to go back to the Lebanon Library project while Sean is still here. And we'll go through the same process, the same discussion that you just did. Again, since this is the only library department project, I'm going to presume that this is number 3.
Yes.
Right, top priority. In terms of emergency or urgent public safety need, I don't think that's the case here.
No.
Corrects a known or anticipated deficiency, I think probably yes.
Yeah.
Substantially improves.
Number of deficiencies in the building that would be remedied by this, yes.
Okay, so a 3 on that.
I'm good with that.
Capacity for future growth. Sounds like this will meet your needs for the 20 years.
Not 2 or 3. I think the growth is in changing the vision of libraries.
So a 3 or 2? Don't all speak at once.
I would say 3.
Okay.
Yeah, so would I.
Results in long-term cost savings. That might be the case with some of the HVAC improvements and things here, maybe?
So it's actually a fairly energy efficient building for the age of the structure. So as I understand it, actually we just had an HVAC meeting a couple of weeks ago. This may not actually save us much, even though we have in the budget putting in a heat pump system due to the fact that we will be bringing in the outside air, doing things like that. We're not anticipating it being actually much of a cost saver in that regard.
Yeah, so that brings up an interesting question, particularly with the pandemic, and that is that, you know, for instance, I know that my grandkids go to the grade school in Hanover, and they've just put in new HVAC and it's not a terribly old building, but because they wanted to make sure that they had the proper ventilation in that. So even though this building may have a system that is cost effective, if it's not bringing in good air and circulating good air, I don't think that, hopefully the pandemic is not going to go on forever, but we're going to have things that are very similar to this. So I don't know how that fits as far as cost saving, but it certainly fits in as far as health and safety. So
so it sounds like maybe this is a 0 or a 1.
I'll give it a 1.
1.
all right.
Supports job development and tax base. 0 or a 1.
0.
Furthers the master plan or other organizational plans. On in there, probably consistent, highly consistent.
I'd give it a 2.
Okay. Leverages non-property tax revenues. I think this is anticipated to be bonded debt, but there will likely be some.
Right.
foundation contributions and grant fundraising. So maybe a 2.
Yeah, I'll go with a 2.
And matching funds for a limited time.
So I can speak to that. So the foundation that has offered the funds for the challenge grant is the Burn, and the Burn Foundation is winding down its operations, so we do need to take advantage of the $50,000 that's on the table right now, and fundraise for this. She actually made that offer 2 years ago. And wanted to fundraise for this project, but needed to be able to tell people what the project was about. So before that foundation does wind down totally, we do need to take advantage of that money that's there.
But David, I think we're under the same problem, like that in this case, H and I, it's one or the other.
Yeah, sort of.
So I would go with 0 for H and 2 for I. I don't know if Tom and Laurel agree.
Yes, I agree.
0 and 2.
And 2.
Okay. All right. So we've completed that project. Now we've spent a pretty good deal of time going through those first 2 projects. Let's see if we can speed things up moving forward. The next projects would be, do we want to cover the airport TIF? Or we can do that?
We can do it either way.
Yeah. We'll go to the fire department. We'll talk first about Station 2 replacement. Chief, are you on the line still?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So, good evening. I will. I think that there's a lot of similarities to both the Station 2 and the Station 1 project. So you'll probably get a little bit of information in the initial presentation that will be relevant to both. So last year, the city commissioned LaValle Benzinger Architects to do a public safety facilities and operational assessment of both the police department and the fire department. I don't want to speak for Deputy Chief Roberts. It looked at what our current footprint was in each station and what our potential growth needs would be for 20 to plus years. And whether or not we had sufficient area to remodel and or redevelop the stations on their current footprint. Overwhelmingly, the recommendation from LaValle Benzinger, and you have the full report in the CIP packet, was that the current footprint at each station does not really facilitate us growing in our existing area, and that we should look at building 2 new stations to geographically serve the community. Stepping back just a second, the study suggested that we explore the option of looking at a single station model and what impacts that would have on our ability to service the community from one location. We looked at that. We ran some overlays on potential response times in what we felt were the more central areas of the city, and it didn't really constitute it. It had a major impact either on East Lebanon or on the north end of Route 10, which is a fair amount of our volume up in the Quail Hollows, Sachem Village, up in that end of town. So the single station model was pretty much kiboshed at that point. Fast forward, we've done space needs and assessments with LaValle Benzinger for both stations. Just to identify some of the issues that we have, I'll start with some of the identified issues at Station 2. Certainly operationally, it's not conducive to growth. The building was built in 1974 as a volunteer fire station. It was staffed in 2000 when the city took on ambulance service. We provided full-time staffing at that station. So it was never built in the context of housing full-time people or firefighters, but it was adapted to identify a response need in West Lebanon back in 2000. The building as it sits now largely sits on its footprint. The city owns about 1 foot on 3 sides of the building and then the front apron area. The front apron area has some significant issues on undermining and drainage that is really we've kind of patched it, plugged it, and got it where we think it's okay right now. But by way of showing our space constraints, the parking provided for that station is given to us as a courtesy from the bank next door. So they permit us to park on the east side or the west side of the station nearest their dumpster. They just, as a courtesy, allow us to park there. So we really don't even have any parking. From an operational standpoint, the building doesn't meet any modern fire station health and safety regulations. All of our protective equipment is stored in the same area where we park fire vehicles. So you have protective clothing intermingling with diesel exhaust and other carcinogens in protective clothing that potentially linger in the station. So that it's really problematic in that sense. The facility is certainly definitely not energy efficient, has some accessibility issues. Their mechanical systems are on their last leg in some respects from the boiler. It's an old oil-fired boiler there. There's unreliable backup power. Our backup generator, again, is pretty old and will serve for short periods of time. The facility doesn't accommodate dual gender capacity. So as we diversify our organization, we do have female firefighters. We don't have facilities that separate or provide gender separate facilities. The potential the program space needs projected to potentially increase staffing as our demands for service continue to increase, suggests about a 55% increase in our what our required footprint is, which brings us to a design for a facility that the early construction estimates run in the area of about $5.3 million, which is slated to be in the construction phase of the CIP for 2022. At this point, we have a placeholder dollar amount for $375,000 in 2021 for land acquisition and some design work. The devil's in the detail. The city manager and I are certainly currently in negotiations for a potential land site, which will certainly meet the space design needs for this facility, which is partly why this project was pushed into the 22 timeframe versus Station 1 on the 2027 timeframe. Obviously, cost would be another factor. So we're fairly comfortable at this point with the $5.3 million price range on the cost of construction, again in 2022. Questions about Station 2?
Laurel, Tom, Bruce?
Yes, thank you, David. I do have a question. And my apologies, but my doorbell rang while you were speaking, so I'm a little bit behind in the conversation, but could you clarify which is Station 1 and which is Station 2?
Yes, certainly. Station 2 is on Main Street in West Lebanon. That's the West Lebanon station.
Okay.
It was a volunteer station up until the year 2000, and then when the city took on ambulance service from a private party, we staffed that station with 2 people 24/7.
So the question about Station 2 has to do with the new propane storage operation in the Westboro Rail Yard.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part of your question?
Yeah, thank you. The question about Station number 2 has to do with the emergency response time for any explosion that might occur in the new propane storage and distribution operation. That's for a rail. There's some.
So, I mean, obviously, go ahead.
No, I think that was the full question.
So, right now, our current response obviously would be pretty quick because of the area. The two locations that we're potentially exploring for location or resiting of a station, obviously, land is a premium in the community. It's not easy to find a lot that will house a building that allows us to build now and potentially have room for expansion beyond that 20 to 30 year time frame. We're right now, either location wouldn't have a significant impact on our response time to the rail yard if we had an incident down there. One of the things that we're looking at in the rail yard is that as that begins to, so the large tanks are not commissioned, they're not in service. Prior to those tanks going into service, there's a number of fire safety measures that we have I would say a verbal agreement at this point with RIMES to improve fire safety and more importantly, early detection. So early detection would give us a better opportunity for a fire down there and in preventing it from becoming bigger or potentially an explosion.
Chief, Laura, you finished?
Sorry?
Are you finished?
Yep.
So Chief, this is Bruce Garland. I know nothing about running either a fire or an ambulance service, and I don't even know if you run other services. But I do know that fire trucks are very big pieces of equipment. Ambulances are much smaller. And I just question, as a naive question, whether you couldn't dissociate the two and have decentralized ambulance stations that are close to places like Quill Hollow and so on, and one centralized fire station that would service. After all, we're in a community of 13,000 people.
So both would have impacts on our ability to meet one, industry standards for response time for our best chance at managing critical medical emergencies and for firefighting. So by way of a model, we are a full-time fire department that runs an ambulance service with what we call our ready time. Obviously, about 70% plus of our responses are related to ambulance. A central fire station would increase response times throughout the entire community, would probably have a major impact on the east side of the community and their insurance rates, given the distance from a fire station. So there's a lot of things that play into that. Response times, road miles from a station have significant impacts on insurance rates and our ability to safely, with limited staffing, fight fires when we do have fires. So
I don't think my question was very clear. So what would happen if you had one central fire station and 3 or 4 satellite ambulance stations?
I'd have to increase my staffing by probably 150 to 200% to do that. I'd have to significantly add staffing. So if you look at running one station, I need, if it were just a single ambulance station, I would need 8 people to do that per station to run 4 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There'd just be no way around not staffing to that level. So by, our staffing footprint already is stretched thin based on our volume. It would really stretch us a lot further by spreading our resources out that way. So, for example, right now, I have an ambulance out on a call. I have a fire engine that's staffed here that's out on a call in West Lebanon. So those firefighters, depending on the type of call, either get on an ambulance or get on a fire truck. And we manage, the best we can with the volume we have. We're doing between 12 and 15 calls a day with 5 or 6 people on duty. We're running thin, and it would be worse. It'd be a larger impact on the budget to go with a model that gave us more stations in terms of that staffing for a safety standpoint.
But there's an economic study that could be done. We're talking $15 million in capital costs. We could bring that down to half and have more people. I don't know where the trade-off is, but you could certainly run some numbers.
I mean, again, it would have a major impact. A single model station would have a major impact on response times, which would adversely affect our resident population, some of our high-end commercial facilities, but primarily our residential facilities that rely on an insurance services rating for their property insurance. And the other fact is that there really is no really primary geographic center to this community based on our square miles and our terrain. There's just really, we looked at that option for even a single station model to run fire and EMS, and it would have a major impact on the community.
Chief,
I thought what you're proposing is a single station model.
No, we're not. We're proposing, you have two projects before you in the capital budget. You have 2021, 2022 replacement of Station 2 in West Lebanon, and then the main fire station has been pushed out to a timeframe of 2027. So
my apologies. So you're not at this point discussing decommissioning the West Lebanon station.
no, it would be moving it. We would be selling that building and moving the station to a little bit further away where we have more land or potentially more land.
But in West Lebanon.
But in West Lebanon, you would always have a fire station and ambulance parked in West Lebanon, and one that would serve the balance of the city or
then I apologize because I misunderstood. Thank you.
But all right.
Tom?
yeah, Chief, this is Tom Martz, and we haven't met yet, but I do want to, first of all, thank you for your services because we have used the ambulance, and the response time was tremendous. We live really on the northern side of West Lebanon, as close as you can get to Hanover, and your people were amazing. But that being said, I agree with you entirely as far as the terrain. The difference between 120 and 10 and how you get across those Wilson Mountains is so limited that it seems like you have to have multiple locations instead of just one location. So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is I'm supporting what you're saying. My hope is that if you're looking for land, that you're coming a little further north than you are in the actual downtown West Lebanon area. That would make me even happier.
So we're trying to stay as contiguous to the downtown area as we can, understanding constraints of land. So I really can't talk much further about that as we're in negotiations right now.
Sure, I understand that situation too. Thank you.
Why don't we try to go ahead and score this one, and then we'll have the chief talk about Station 1. Chief, is Station 2 the highest priority, higher priority?
So if you ask me today, that my higher priority would be Station 1 because of our administrative offices and the majority of my staffing here on a day-to-day basis would be a higher priority than Station 2. Unfortunately, there's, the costs don't fit into this one, the 6-year CIP plan, and 2, we're having a little bit more challenge finding a much bigger area of land that I would need for a central fire station.
Okay, so we score this one for division priority. We'd score Station.
I would score this a 2 and Station 1 a 3.
Okay. In terms of addressing emergency or urgent public safety need?
I'm considering Station 2 is 46 years old. It certainly does not meet any basic modern firefighting health and safety needs. Cancer is a big issue in our business now. It has been for several years. I would rate this pretty high in my mind.
Okay, board committee members, you want to, like a 10, like a 13, 15?
I would say a 13, at least.
Yeah, I would at least go with that also.
Okay. Addressing known deficiencies or anticipated deficiencies in service or facility, that sounds like a 3.
Agreed.
I'd agree.
Again, we gotta work on those two criteria, but, providing capacity for future growth. Is this gonna meet your needs, chief, for 20 years or more?
Yes.
Okay, sounds like a 3.
Sounds good.
Long-term cost savings, is it gonna be less expensive to operate a fire department?
My guess would be that yes, it would be in the context of, energy efficiency. Both of my facilities are really, really poor in energy efficiency. So I would say yes, there'll be some long-term cost savings.
So a 2 or a 3, committee members?
2.
2.
Job development or increased tax base?
No.
0.
0. Furthers the goals of the master plan or organizational plans?
I give it a 1.
We got a 1,
I would agree.
okay. Leveraging non-property tax revenues?
I would say potentially, if the federal stimulus package comes out, will be having camera or what so-called camera-ready projects will give us a higher likelihood to potentially leverage federal funding, but there are no programs currently.
Okay, so maybe a 1 or a 2?
I'd say 2.
Yeah, I'll go with the 2.
We don't have a 2 category. A 3, 1, 0.
Well, it's a range.
Okay.
And then matching funds, are there matching funds available?
Not at current.
Okay. All right, thank you. Chief, do you want to cover station 1?
Yeah, so this one will be a little bit briefer because it really, it's the same context in terms of the deficiencies. Currently, Station 1, our biggest challenge with Station 1 is, I would say, it costs us more to buy a fire truck because of the constraints of our buildings. So, for example, when I buy a fire engine, I have to buy the fire engine to fit in the building versus having the ability to be more competitive in our bid process because of the slope of the ramp on the front of the building and the archway of our doors and the apparatus floor. It really does not. It's not conducive to a more competitive bid process for buying a fire engine. As a matter of fact, some of the industry folks that we have bid with say that we're probably spending anywhere between 10 and 15% more than we would if we could buy a more stock type vehicle for our fire apparatus. As far as operationally, we have stacked fire apparatus. So for a report of a fire in East Lebanon where we have no fire hydrants outside the municipal water district, the truck that we carry as a tanker is parked behind our primary engine because it's the only place we could put it. So our response to a call is significantly delayed because I've got to move one truck out of the way, pull that truck out, put the other truck back, depending on the weather, and we obviously don't want to leave trucks laying around outside. So that's a big problem in terms of operational efficiency. If you just walk around our station apparatus floor, you can see that we are extremely constrained on space. Modern health and safety, we don't have adequate decontamination areas. So if we have a fire, we decontaminate our protective equipment. Our firefighters are required to shower and then change uniform. It's all contiguous where there's no, I call it, there's no sanitary versus unsanitary area of the building. And that's what we're looking to design in the context of both fire stations. The proposed program would increase our potential space needs by 50%, provide for dual gender facilities. Right now, our women's locker room is the primary men's and shower room on the second floor with a lock on it. So we're, it's not a good place to be in that context. So largely the recommendation was to increase our footprint and move this building to an area where we can find land. Again, that's my biggest challenge right now is finding a space. We've identified a potential space. We are waiting for the conceptual construction estimates on this. The city manager and I had a meeting today with the contractor or the architect. We believe that this building is probably going to come in the $13 to $15 million range, not including land acquisition. So we'll have a better handle on that in the next couple of weeks. But we're looking at a pretty big price tag. But understand this building was built in 1954. We're doing about a quarter of the calls that we do today, if not less, and it's certainly met it's served its needs, but we're really strained for space. I've got 3 people sharing an office right now, and that's not conducive to just operational efficiency. So I'll leave it at that. I don't have a whole lot more to say about Station 1 at this point.
Any final questions before we score this one?
Hey, I do have one question, David. And so when these 2 facilities will be decommissioned and new facilities will be built, will the city hold on to those properties, or will the city sell those? And will the sales of those buildings, if they are sold, offset some of the costs that we're talking about?
Yes. So the plan right now would be to sell both stations. Our early market assessment on Station 2 is about $350,000 value. And I don't remember the number for Station 1, but given its proximity to the downtown, the land, we own all the land behind the station all the way out to the fence line where headrest is, or the city does. We don't. That we'd probably be close to the $1 million range in terms of the potential sale of this property, and those would go back to general fund, but ultimately offset the cost.
Okay, and then a follow-up question to that: neither one of these would be considered historic buildings, so it wouldn't be. So whoever would buy them wouldn't necessarily have to recondition what exists there. They could put a new facility in.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct, to the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we've already established that this was the higher priority for the department as a 3 in terms of addressing emergency or public safety needs. Is it essentially the same as the Station 2 situation?
I would suggest, with the exception of A, which you just outlined, we just score the 2 the same.
Agreed with that, Tom and Laurel? Score it the same as the Station 2 with respect, other than the priority?
Yeah, I think I would. That sounds good to me.
Okay. I didn't catch that.
Yes, I agree. Sorry.
Okay. Perfect. I'll put those scores in. And then I think we're ready to move to the police facility renovation and expansion project. Deputy Chief Phil Roberts is here to discuss that.
Good evening. So to kind of echo what Chief Christopoulos just went over, we also took part in the 2019 study for the public safety facility. The current police department was built in 1991, so we're pushing 30 years old. And what the study came back and told us was that we're in need of a 65% increase in space over what we currently have. We're completely out of storage in the entire facility. We're at the point now where we're getting portable sheds and putting them out back for storage, which just isn't going to work long term for us. A lot of our officers, to include our communications supervisor, use closets as offices, which is just not efficient to get business done. Our female locker room can only accommodate 5 female officers. We currently have 3, but as our chief said, we're seeing an uptick in female applicants in our hiring process over the past few years. So that's another issue that we've got to get addressed. And then there's the outside of the building. Our parking lot, we have outgrown that over the past several years. There's been no additions to the parking since 1991. And if we have any kind of event, training, or otherwise, cars are just stacked up on the side of the parking lot. We have nowhere to put them. And this is the total cost of this project is $8.5 million, but it's phased out over 4 different construction phases. One of them would be in 2023, and then phase 2 would move into the 2027 period. And 3 and 4 would follow that. And then another important issue on top of the parking lot is our outside storage. We use sheds for our bikes and stuff like that, but we only actually have 1 bay for all of our vehicles, which is 20 plus vehicles. So in the winter time, with storms, it's very time consuming to have to de-ice these cars when they sit all night. It takes about 1.5 day. And we only currently have 1 salad court, which is where you drive in prisoner into a working area. So if we have 2 or 3 incidents going on, automatic only having 1 day to secure the prisoner.
Okay. Laurel, Tom, Bruce, any questions on the police facility renovation project?
I believe this is very similar to what we heard last year.
Yes.
Maybe had a full planning board. All of it rings bells.
Yeah. Laurel or Tom?
Well, I thought that the written presentation was pretty clear, and so I appreciate whoever put this this particular document together in preparation. I noticed several times it talks about open areas, and again, I'm thinking about what we're currently involved with coronavirus and in a facility that is already too small. I wonder, are all of the personnel wearing masks there and how does that function right now?
It's been pretty problematic. We do wear masks when feasible, but we've actually kind of reorganized the entire downstairs of the apartment. Our training room has been turned into portable desks, which are socially distanced out. So it's kind of a mess downstairs right now due to COVID.
Laurel, any questions before we score this one?
So, just an observation is whenever I have had occasion to be around or near the police station, I've been struck by how almost absolutely empty the parking lot is. And
Go on, I'm sorry.
And I can't envision, I can't think of a single time when I've driven by there in the 22 years I've lived in Lebanon, when I've seen more than 3 or 4 cars in that parking lot.
Are you referring to the front of the building where the public entry is?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
just,
that holds, I think 6 or 7.
I'm sorry, I just lost the sound.
With any employee and other.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, the issue seems to be with the staff parking, not so much the public parking.
Yeah, it's not the front. It's staff, visitors, fellow law enforcement agencies. Whenever we have training, or if you go by during the day and you actually drive out back, you'll see that it's at full capacity daily.
And the public area that's often empty cannot be utilized for any of that activity?
We try our best to leave that open to public people coming in to make complaints or requesting records or what have you. So we like to leave those open.
Okay. From a scoring standpoint, this is again the only police department project, so I will assume it's your top priority.
It is the only one, yes.
Addresses, let me get the scoring criteria back up there. Addresses an emergency or an urgent public safety need. Does the committee want to think of this much the same way as the 2 fire stations, or or differently?
To me, it seems somehow less urgent.
Okay,
You know, it's a tough one because we do rely on police so much that, you know, I don't want to necessarily grade one down over over another service that is provided for us, but for some reason it doesn't seem quite to be the emergency that was presented by the police. But I would still put it in the 10 range. I mean, I think for a community, these two service areas are vital. So that's what I'd do.
so like an 8 to 10 score?
I feel good about that if Bruce and Laurel feel good about it.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Me too.
Okay, corrects a known or anticipated deficiency. It sounds like it does that.
Yeah.
Provides capacity for future growth. Is this again will this meet your needs for 20 years or more? No?
Yes, I'd probably be 30.
Okay. Results in long-term cost savings.
I think probably in the efficiency energy area of the newest lighting systems and newer windows, that kind of stuff, that's probably pretty minimal.
Okay, maybe a 1.
No, one.
Supports job development or tax base, increased tax base. Sounds like a 0.
Yeah.
Furthers the master plan or other organizational plans. Again, we gave the fire stations a 1 for what it's worth.
The one,
I
two.
think 1 sounds good.
Yep, I agree.
Leverages non-property tax revenues.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, are there, I know the fire chief mentioned potential stimulus funds, is that?
Fees, yeah, I mean, our alarm fees and whatnot would probably go up. We don't get to go for like ambulance calls, police calls, you know, we don't go those. They're probably the same.
So maybe a 1 for this one? And then matching funds, there may not be any.
No, not that we're aware of at this time.
Okay. All right. The next project to be reviewed would be Recreational Parks. And we have Rick Deshanis with us to cover 3 different projects for the Recreation Parks Department.
Which one would you like to look at first?
Let's start with the community center.
Community center. Excellent. Currently, we are working with Municipal Resources Incorporated. They're helping us survey the community and find out if there is desire for a community center here in Lebanon. Survey went out just over a week ago. We have over 500 respondents. Early numbers are saying that folks are interested in supporting the development of a community center, or at least wanting more information about it. Currently, the Lebanon Recreation Parks Department does not manage or maintain any indoor space. We rely on our community partners for that space, which puts us as not a priority. We certainly have a good working relationship with the school to utilize space in the summer for summer camp. However, we can typically only get about 6 weeks worth of summer camp, and folks are always saying, what do I do with my kids the other 3 weeks of summer? So we look at this as an opportunity to better serve the needs of the community for out of school time. There's also a demand for after school programming. Also with the coronavirus, this summer, we were unable to access any school space, so we were unable to operate our camp, where several of our neighbors were able to run their camps, certainly with a lot of strict guidelines in place, but we certainly heard from the community that there was a need for that child care summer camp in the summertime. So we're trying to, we're interested in working to meet those demands of the community.
Okay. Questions for Rick before we score this one?
I do have a couple of questions. Believe it or not, back in my history, 40 years ago, I built indoor tennis clubs. 40,000 square foot facility is approximately 8 indoor tennis clubs or tennis courts. The only big question I have is this, and that is, when this facility would be built and operated, would it be in competition with private development of other facilities like the over in the White River Junction area, the swim club up there, and some of the other places? Would this be in competition with private organizations that already exist? And the second thing is, I'm assuming that these facilities would have to charge something for the programs that are being held in this facility. Would that be an offset to some of the costs?
Yeah, so currently we are not looking to conflict and, thinking about UVAC, we're not currently looking at building a pool because that would also duplicate services that are already done here in town with the CCBA. Right now the rec department doesn't have a home. We've moved over into the River Valley Community College building, which we have a 2-year lease, which we just entered into our 2nd year. And we may get a 3rd year, but they have other plans for that space. So the rec department will be moving again. And we feel that it's important for, a rec department of our size, the amount of programs that we have a home. So we're not looking to duplicate services that are already out there. And one thing that we have heard in preliminary surveys and conversations is many of the recreational opportunities in the Upper Valley that folks used to enjoy no longer exist, like a Grantham Indoor. And folks really miss having that place to go in the winter to train for sports or to play in leagues. And certainly anything that we develop, there would be a fee base. All of our programs currently have a fee-based structure, and depending on the type of space that the community wants, we would be looking at a business model so that we were as self-sufficient as possible for operating.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Laura.
Are you also looking at any kind of private fundraising opportunities?
Once we complete the survey, there will be lots of opportunities for naming rights, private donors. We also anticipate that there will be grants available. I know we cannot necessarily count on it, but we do know that these types of projects, if they can be shovel ready, I forget the term that Chief Christopoulos used, it wasn't shovel ready. These may be the type of project that could be worked into a stimulus package if that were ever to be passed. But yes, there will be lots of opportunity for non-tax revenue.
I guess my see if I can put this into words, so bear with me. Thank you in advance. I guess what I'm hearing is that there are a lot of, they seem like loose threads out there that have yet to be completed. The survey, certain conversations, the state of the pandemic, other athletic facilities in the area. It's not entirely clear to me that the community, in quotation marks, feels a need for this. Can you convince me that that's the case?
You know, you're right, the survey is not complete. I can only tell you that of the 500 folks that have completed it thus far, 66% fully support the project. We're at 33% that would like more information. And then the remainder of folks are in the, I do not support the vision of developing a community center. We do hear from our community partners a lot that, the Upper Valley young professionals, they are looking for ways to keep young people in the area. And community centers can be economic drivers for communities. And that's why we have started to go down this path of really delving into what could a community center be here in Lebanon, and do folks want to see it. My understanding right now is that this project has been put into the parking lot, but we want to be ready armed with this information if opportunities do arise for stimulus funding or perhaps other opportunities in the community come up.
Thank you.
Bruce, any questions before we score?
Good.
Okay, Recreation actually does have multiple projects in terms of the community center versus the storage and maintenance building, which we'll cover in a moment, and playing fields. Where would you assess this as top priority?
This is such a loaded question, David, because I know I'm not supposed to say 3 for all of them.
You're not allowed to
But here I am.
That's the one rule for the scoring.
That's the one rule with the scoring. We do put this as a 3 on our priority list. The first time a community center was put in a master plan was 1998. It was in the latest rendition of a master plan. When you look at a community of our size and you look at our rec department, and all the things that we offer, and not being able to manage a single indoor space to program, having to solely rely on others, often puts our programs and services at a disadvantage. So I do put this at a 3.
Okay. Fair enough. Very good. Addresses, let me get this criteria back up here. Addresses an emergency or urgent public health, public safety need rather.
If you kept that word health in there,
Yes,
I would say that there is a health crisis in the United States with childhood obesity, adult obesity, and that is also listed in the master plan and part of our goals. But it does not, I would not say that it meets an emergency need.
Okay. So maybe how does the committee want to score this one?
I give it a 5.
What did you say, Bruce?
Bruce at 5.
Oh, all right. Well, I guess I could be talked into that. I was just going to say, I don't see how it actually fits in category in B myself, but I'll go with 5.
I tend to agree with Tom. I don't see that it's applicable to this category. I mean, the same, I could be talked into a 5, but I just don't see this as fulfilling some emergency or urgent public safety need. It just doesn't fit.
Right.
Do you want to go 5 or do you want to go lower?
If it would, I would go lower.
Like a 3?
Yeah.
I think that sounds more reasonable.
Bruce?
That's fine.
3. Known deficiencies, addresses known deficiencies. Certainly that's the case. Call that one a 3?
Yeah, I think this makes a more logical 3 than actually D did.
And capacity for future?
Yep, I agree.
Capacity for future growth?
Yeah, I would give that a 3 also.
Yeah, me too.
Long-term, results in long-term cost savings?
No.
Probably not.
No.
No.
So 0. Supports jobs, job development or increased tax base?
I don't see it as doing that.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
Okay. Furthers the master plan or other organizational plans? I think it definitely, Rick mentioned the rec master plan from over 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I think that it fits that. I would give it a 3 there.
I agree.
Non-property tax revenues?
That's not so clear to me. I mean, Rick stated that this is a fee-based operation, but is it sufficiently fee-based to generate revenues that would offset expenses?
Yeah, so maybe a 0 or a 1?
Well, you know, I think probably it has the potential of offsetting operating expenses. I'm not sure that it has the potential of offsetting the cost of construction.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Maybe a 1?
yeah, I would think maybe a 1.
And matching funds?
Not apparent that there are any available.
I'm sorry?
Not apparent that there are any available at the moment.
No, it doesn't sound like it. We're at 7:30. I'd like to try to wrap up, get through at least through the rec projects by 8 o'clock so that we can all sign off at the appointed time. So we'll move to the Parks Storage and Maintenance Building.
All right, so this building, again, the rec department, we found ourselves in a situation where we were a tenant somewhere else. That was in the old DPW garage on Spencer Street that was recently torn down and is slated for redevelopment. So currently we have all of our vehicles and trailers and some of our equipment that will spend the winter of 2020 outside, where you have most departments that have vehicles, they maintain them, such as DPW. They have at least covered storage or indoor storage for all of their equipment. So this would meet those needs. We have temporarily purchased some shipping containers that we have things kind of, you know, we have 2 of them that are floor to ceiling full of a lot of our rec stuff. And if you come to our office as well, we have 1 storage room there, again, where floor to ceiling with all the things that it takes to operate our department.
Any questions on this one before we score it?
So you have a plan for it?
Yeah, so the current plan is, if you go over to Civic Memorial Park in West Lebanon, where we currently have a small storage building there that is in need of investment. It needs a roof, it needs siding, it needs those things. We would actually demolish that and build on that same footprint, because it already has city water, city sewer. We would just go much larger than what is currently there.
Other questions?
So is this number 2 out of 3?
This is the second one. This is also a high priority. With, we have things like,
No, but you don't get to, so you got 3, you already did 1.
I know. That's why I said I feel as though I'm kind of breaking the rules here. I look at this, like I said, as a 3 as well, because you take we have a recreation van that has a 9-foot high ceiling height. I have to get on a ladder to clean that off in the winter. And if I'm taking seniors on trips 3 days a week in the winter time, and I have to get on that ladder 3 times, I mean, I know you can't guarantee that it's gonna snow, but this is also a very high priority for the rec department. Also because all of our vehicles and trailers and tractor implements, if they have to live outside, it just shortens their lifespan.
I think last year we did allow departments or divisions, they could only have 1 3, but they could have multiple 2s.
All
right, give it a 2.
Okay, so we'll give it a
Serve
2.
my heartstrings.
You should have went for 4.
Emergency or urgent public safety need. Doesn't sound like it. Is this also perhaps a 3, similar to the community center, or maybe not even?
I'd say not even.
Yeah, I don't think it's, I just don't see where it qualifies in this particular area. Yeah, and as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, gee, if we're talking about eventually building a 40,000 square foot building, I know this doesn't help us in the short term, but it seems like to me, maybe incorporating this building with that building and making it, instead of a 40,000 square foot building, a 45,000 square foot building, or a little bit bigger, then you would have a cost with savings because you would be doing it all at the same time. It's a shame that they're not going to be synced, time-wise to be able to do that. But I don't see that this has any kind of an emergency need from a public safety standpoint.
Okay, so a 0 there, but addressing a known or anticipated deficiency.
That's a 3.
Seems like it certainly does that.
Yep.
Capacity for future growth.
Yeah, I'm going 2.
At least a 2 or 3?
Yeah.
I would say a 2 because we don't know. We don't know what the demand is. We don't know what it's going to be.
Okay. Long-term cost savings.
Possibly, but it's not clear.
Yeah, as far as helping with us being able to keep vehicles longer because they're not living outside, but it's.
Yep, so that's something.
Yep.
Well, so why don't we give it a 2?
So a 2 or?
2.
Okay. Job development or tax base?
No.
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 Goals of the master plan or organizational plan?
I think that that's tangentially because, obviously recreation and that for the community is important in the master plan, but it specifically does, where the other facility specifically does something as far as the program, this doesn't.
So maybe 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leveraging non-property tax revenues, probably not.
David, I know I kind of took some liberty there on this one when I asked you a question about this.
Yes.
Maybe it doesn't fit the criteria as listed here, but the vision of this building is that half of it will be paid for through the impact fees that go to recreation. So only half of this building would be through tax revenue.
Good point.
So is that a 1 two?
Yeah, two.
Two?
Yeah.
Matching funds for a limited time?
So,
Doesn't seem like it.
Not a lot of people want to put their name on a storage shed.
Okay, and while we have Rick here, we'll jump down. The next project is the playing fields.
Am I allowed to have more than one, too?
You may have more than one too.
A 2.5?
We did get police at 2.5 last year.
All right. I would strongly encourage a 2.5 here. Again, recreation in this town, unfortunately, we've seen some of our influence contract a bit. We recently lost use of the Elks Field due to a situation they found themselves in and needing to subdivide and sell their property off. And Dartmouth Coach was in need of a parking lot, so a heavily used public field right there on the Lombard Road is now a beautiful parking lot. So not only have we lost that space, but when the city voted to sell off the old Lebanon Junior High School, that has moved over into private hands. We had been very, very hopeful that we were going to be able to sign something along the terms of a long-term lease, 25 years, 50 years. We have not been able to do that. The most we're able to get is a 2-year lease at this time. And just starting last year, 2019, was the first time that we've had to pay for use of those fields. So we now currently rent that field space. And I know that the gentleman who owns it often dangles that as a carrot, as something that, you know, we just don't have a lot of confidence that those fields are going to be in public use for a long time to come. And if we were to lose those, it would negatively impact our offerings and our ability to continue to offer the things that we do. It would mean a reduction in services.
So this project involves playing fields.
So
currently, currently we are kind of revitalized a project that was, I believe it was in the late 90s. They looked at the Lower Meadows, which is behind Timken, and we have started working with Timken. Again, we are very close to finalizing a 100-year lease on that property. We currently are engaged with a wetland scientist to determine which pieces of that parcel can be developed in the future. And we do feel that that project would at least bring us up to meet current demands. We've seen a tremendous increase in demand for adult sports programming with the addition of the Upper Valley Rugby, men's and women's, several adult soccer leagues that are looking for space. We have an adult Frisbee league that we're no longer able to offer space to, so they've gone to another community. So we do look at this as a pretty high priority as well.
I'm assuming that those adult leagues are willing to pay for space?
They are. We do not currently have a fee-based structure for renting our fields. Usually they're getting non-prime time space, but it certainly has been talked about looking at a fee-based structure.
So I'm relatively new to the community and only been here the last 4 years. what sort of outdoor recreation facilities does the city own, other than those things that are in schools? Or, in other words, does the Park and Rec Department have any outdoor facilities that are your own? Baseball diamonds, softball fields, that type of thing?
We own one softball diamond, and we own one 90-foot baseball diamond. And if you go to any of those baseball diamonds or softball diamonds, there's a utility field in the outfield. That means in the spring it's lacrosse, in the fall it's soccer, and none of our fields, it's impossible to do maintenance or give them any rest that they need, because the second the snow melts, the fields are hit, and they're open right until snow flies.
Yeah. Well, the reason that I'm asking is because, as Bruce knows and David knows, I've lived in a lot of different communities, and actually for a community our size, it seems strange, quite honestly, that we don't have more outdoor recreation facilities for this town that are run by the city park department than what we have. So I guess where I'm going with this is in looking at the three projects that you've presented to us, and I understand why the first one was the number 3, the city, the center, the community center is your highest ranking one. However, this seems to be one that I would look at very, very important also, and perhaps, ahead of that one as far as immediate needs. So where I'm going, I guess, is that this looks like to me a more important project than the one that we just did. And I would certainly put it up there close to that first one of yours.
I would even be willing to say that when I sit here and think about it, the community center is certainly in need, but it has a lot of wants in there as well. And I think that the community has those wants as well. Were we to lose one more playing field that's not in our control, like I said, you would see a reduction in services from the recreation department. So I would even be willing to use the 3 on the playing fields and that 2.75 on the community center.
I think it was 2.5.
Oh, 2.5, all right.
I will give you a 2.5 on the community center.
Okay.
And were there other questions, or should we go ahead and score the playing field?
Go ahead.
Okay, so addressing an emergency or urgent public safety need.
No.
No.
Okay, deficiency, certainly.
Yes.
Capacity for future growth,
Yes.
certainly.
Yes.
Long-term cost savings, to the extent we're not having to rent space, perhaps.
I think so.
Yeah.
And also the cost savings that you're not at the mercy of somebody else who all of a sudden pulls the facilities out from under you, and suddenly you can't offer the program, and so you lose the revenue from the program. I just think ownership of these facilities would be more important.
Yep. Job development and tax base, you mentioned that part of recruiting people to this area is, providing recreation.
Every job listing I see mentions recreation for any of the big companies. They're trying to keep young people here.
Yeah, so it seems at least a 2.
Right.
I think we gave the runway safety area project a 2. That sort of tangential support. Furthers the master plan and other organizational plans. Seems like a definite.
I think that it has to. I would give it a 3.
On which one, Tom?
On the furthering the master plan.
Oh, yes, sorry, I thought we were still talking about the prior one. Leverages non-property tax revenues and matching funds.
On the matching funds, I can say that the Timken Foundation is willing to put some money into the project. Dartmouth Coach also has said they will put money into the project. Neither of them have given a specific dollar amount, but again, a project of this magnitude, a nice thing about that location is it's all along the river as well. So there's also future possibilities for a river park, which personal opinion is we need to utilize the river better for recreation in our community. So I think that there will, so I know it's not definitive at this moment, but there will be the opportunity for matching funds and naming rights.
And you mentioned with respect to the non-property tax revenue, you spoke a little bit about renting the space to these adult leagues and things. Is that, if you had more space, is that something you might develop, that sort of framework for doing?
We certainly, it would allow us to explore that option, yeah.
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 Okay. So for the non-property tax revenue, maybe 1? And then for the matching funds, 2?
Sounds good.
1 or 2?
Oh, sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, so we've made it through the rec. It is 7:50. I would, if I may, I would like to, since Carl is still here, the next project is actually planning and development, but it's the airport tech park project. And it's becoming more and more of a joint project between planning and the airport. So if I may, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about that particular project, and then we can wrap it up and we'll handle the other planning projects either at the end of the next meeting or at another one, if that's okay.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so as you may know, the tech park property, or the tech park project was funded for some preliminary engineering for 2020. That work is underway. The consultant has given us, I believe, 60% plans and cost estimates. So we're trying to get to the point where we have plans that are ready to bid and permits in place, possibly as early as the end of this year, so that in 2021, what we would propose is the funding for the construction of the first phase of this project. As written in the description, we talked about splitting this project into 2 phases so that the city can sort of make the minimum investment necessary to open up this area for development before we commit to building the full length of road, the full length of water, sewer, drainage, and everything else. So phase 1 would open up, would construct the storm drainage facility that would accommodate all of the future development, just because the way the land is sloped, it's all going to flow to this one spot anyway, along with enough road, water, and sewer to open up the first 2 or 3 building sites for development. It also has the possibility of allowing 1 to 2, possibly 3 building sites on the adjacent property, which is owned by Upper Valley Tech Park LLC, that could be accessed from this road on the city's property. The Tech Park property itself already has frontage and infrastructure stubbed out to it from within the business park, the adjacent business park on technology. Missed out on some development opportunity because they weren't sufficiently ready to split off a lot and build for a prospective tenant. So I think they have reached the point where they do anticipate moving ahead with perhaps a subdivision application on their property to sort of get them the next step along the road where they'll be much more ready to build on their property. And again, the improvements proposed for the city's property would get us ready to build. I'm aware that the city manager has heard from projects, and I think it's been talked about a little bit, maybe tonight, or maybe this is something I heard earlier today, but there is a lot of talk of businesses in more dense urban areas of the country, or at least the Northeast, that are looking in response to the COVID pandemic, are looking to relocate or plan new facilities in less dense areas like ours. So we do continue to believe that there is interest both for the tech park property and the city's property. I think the expectation is that the city's property would be long-term lease arrangements so that the annual lease payments become revenue for the airport operations. Obviously, that will not be the case for development of the tech park property, but for both properties, new development representing new taxable value will both generate a tax increment that would go back to pay off whatever debt is incurred to initiate this project. So there's an amount proposed for 2021 in the master plan for general fund debt. Again, the expectation is that over time, as development occurs on either property, those tax increment revenues would be used to pay off the debt service on that. The second phase of the tech park, or the TIF district improvements on the airport property, is currently programmed for 25, but that's just a guess. It would depend on how quickly the first 2 or 3 building sites fill up on the city's property, as to when we begin to commit revenues towards extending that road and water and sewer to open up another 2 to 3 sites on the property. The expectation from the plans are that there would be at least 5, possibly 6 areas of potential building on this property. It's roughly 20, I want to say it's 27 acres of buildable area that we're looking at. The remainder of the roughly 50-acre property, the slopes and wetlands and some conservation area would substantially limit or prohibit development on those areas. So that's the essence of this project. I don't know if Carl, do you have anything to add from the airport side?
No, I think you covered it. One thing that I have heard from the Federal Aviation Administration, and one of the requirements in the grant assurances that come with every grant is to make the airport as self-sustaining as possible. And this project goes a long way to accomplishing that goal. That's included with every grant that we sign for.
So I think, are there any questions on this one?
So, David, let me just clarify. So the city would continue to own those facilities. Would they lease the space out, or would you have long-term leases on the property for a builder to build out and develop their own project there?
The latter of the two. We would own the land and ground lease it to a tenant to build their own facility.
Okay, all right. I mean, it sounds like a good plan to me. That's, we already have a lot of facilities that are being developed in that area. And again, having the airport just right there, I think it makes a lot of sense.
It also adds the necessity of doing that runway work.
I'm sorry, you broke up just a little bit there, Laurel.
It also adds a bit of urgency and credence to doing the runway work that was discussed earlier.
Yeah, good point. So I'm not sure how Sean would have scored this in terms of priority. This is certainly one of our probably top 2 priorities. I guess I'm inclined to say this would be our number 3, our top priority, to get this going, to get the airport more self-sustaining, as was just mentioned. So I would give this, from a department priority standpoint, give this a 3.
I would absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, it sounds good to me too.
Yeah, we've got some other projects that we'll talk about next time that are important too, but we'll go with the 3. In terms of emergency or urgent public safety need, I don't think there's much there.
No.
Agreed.
In correcting a known deficiency or anticipated deficiency in service, I think it improves the situation for the city. Again, it helps get the airport more self-sufficient. And it from a building standpoint, in spite of the fact that we've got some projects, some industrial park type projects that have been approved by the planning board, they're not ready to build. For somebody who needs to act in the next 12 to 18 months, which is normally when I get a phone call, they're looking for a piece of land because they need to be in a new building in 12 to 18 months. And if somebody's got to build a road and everything else, it just can't be done. So I think this does address a deficiency in that sense, in terms of getting some thoughts, Bruce?
I'll go with the 3.
Yeah, I think I do a 3 too.
I agree.
Real quick question. I'm getting sort of musical feedback, right, all through this this meeting tonight. Is there music going on there in the building that you're?
You're not part of the band, Tom.
Yeah, no, it's in the farmer's market right outside.
Okay, all right.
It's been pretty good.
We're gonna hear clarinet next meeting.
Are we building soundproofing into the?
I was thinking of getting up and dancing, so, okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's been pretty good, so it's been nice to have.
It's been calming.
Capacity for future growth, I think this does.
Yeah.
Long-term cost savings, I don't think so.
No.
Yes, but you just said that it could help the airport become more
Well,
self-sufficient.
that's a good point. I take that back.
Right.
So taking on new roads, water, sewer is going to cost us something, but revenue generated from this site is going to offset other costs at the airport.
Would that go to H though?
Yeah.
I think H is, we'll get something there too. So in terms of long-term cost savings, maybe a 1 or a 2. I don't think it's going to, well, not directly decrease operating costs because it's sort of it's tangential.
Kind of 2 maybe.
Maybe a 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good for that.
Yep.
Okay. I think it definitely supports job development and tax base.
Absolutely.
It definitely furthers the master plan, which specifically recommends developing this area and trying to support the airport.
Agreed.
It does support non-property tax revenue in the sense of the tax increment financing that can be used to pay off the debt service here.
Agreed.
From a matching funds standpoint, I don't think there is anything at the moment. Although if like a lot of these projects, if something happens at the congressional level relative to stimulus funds, and we've got a shovel-ready project, then maybe that could account for something. But I don't think I don't think we can count on that.
David, you're such an optimist.
Well, I know they're talking about it. So maybe a 1 or a 0 there, probably a 0.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's pretty good. We got through 10 or maybe 8 or 9 projects tonight. But I think hopefully we have sort of gotten everybody up to speed about how this process works in terms of reviewing the projects, asking the questions, talking about things, going through the scoring. So hopefully next Thursday, when Public Works folks are here, we'll be able to get through a few more projects. We certainly won't have quite as much introductory discussion, laying the groundwork for the subcommittee's work. So we'll endeavor to get through as much as we can next week, and if we can get through everything, that would be fantastic. And if we can't, we'll schedule a third meeting.
Put that in the.
So David,
Yes, sir.
if we were close to finishing next week, could we extend for whatever time would need to be extended in order to finish?
It's going to be up to you, but absolutely. I
Okay,
mean, I would much prefer to stay an extra half an hour next week than to come back for a third day.
so would I. And I think it's going to go much quicker because we're in a rhythm now. I think
I think you are. I think you've found your stride. So I think what needs to happen now is for a motion to adjourn.
I will move that we adjourn this meeting.
I would
Okay.
say that.
And Laurel seconds, and it's a roll call vote, unfortunately. We'll start with Laurel,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
and Bruce.
Yes.
Okay, so
I know.
this meeting is adjourned at 8:06.
All right. Good night,
Thank you
everybody.
all for your efforts tonight, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Okay. Good job.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
How was your
With the soccer court.
That was good because